Hello and welcome to the Goon Talk, back in with you guys for another show after Arsenal have beaten Leeds United 1-0 after what has been a awful evening. Awful is probably way too harsh. It was dogged, it was gritty, but ultimately Arsenal come out the win and progress to the fourth round, in which they will play away at Bournemouth, obviously a side that we've just faced under Mikel Arteta. Didn't get a win against them, but hopefully we can see some progression and hopefully we can take that win as well. But we are here to obviously discuss that game and discuss that performance. And for me, when you think about these types of performances, they're the ones which always Arsenal come a cropper against. These are the performances and the teams in which Arsenal look dreadful for 90 minutes. And instead, we were dreadful for about 45, maybe 50 minutes rather than the whole 90. And that does show a level of progression. It does show that Arsenal are improving. It does show that we are improving as a team and improving as a club and as a system and as a collective is the most important thing, to see these players improving regularly and seeing the individual performances as well. But there are some things that we need to discuss and some things that aren't so great. We will talk about all of those with our fantastic live chat. Thank you ever so much for tuning in. Jonas Philberg says, shocking first half, but we're through. Rick D says, at work, so I didn't watch it. On Mark Goldbridge, it sounded pretty average by us in first and not that amazing in second, but better in the second half. That pretty much sums it up, to be honest. Leeds needed Eddie, Laf Marceau says. Impulse. Tekos Man said, Leeds is the most pale side I've ever seen. Whatever that means. The Carl Helberg says, disgusting sport. Luke Howard says, worst first half season, mediocre second half, but we got the job done. How are you, Tom? Says Taib. I'm good, thank you, mate. Thank you for asking. Jack the Ripper says, holding was atrocious. I'm not hating, I'm just observing. That passing scared the hell out of me. Ozzy Guna said, in the past, on a night like this, we would have thrown that away. Good signs moving forwards. G Wheels, I've just missed your comment, but I'm going to grab it just a second. In my opinion, our players can't build themselves up for this game. The FA Cup is not what it used to be. I think Arteta should have mixed them with more youngsters and they would have got themselves up for a game like this. And that's actually where I wanted to start, because when you look at this performance as a whole, I think what you saw there was a complete contrast to the game against Manchester United. The game against Manchester United was a game in which Arsenal were desperate to win, desperate to show what they had done in terms of the coaching and how they wanted to react to the change in that coaching style that they've been implemented with for the last couple of weeks. And they did that. They also wanted to recover from that Chelsea game where they put in so much effort and didn't get the rewards that they deserved from the first 60, if you can even say that, probably first 45 minutes of football. But ultimately, what you saw today was a team which still has the mental fragility and arguably mental arrogance that comes up against championship sides and thinks that this isn't really the game where we're really going to go for it. We're probably just going to coast through this game, take the win and move to the next round without too many problems. But that isn't the case. Leeds are a very capable side. They're full of some really, really good young and promising players and some experienced players too, and players that have been around the block like Bamford that really caused us a few issues in that first half. I mean, when they hit the bar, the chances they had on the outside of the box that they just couldn't take. Martinez made some really, really good and important saves, which is good to say. Obviously, he's had a couple of iffy games in the Europa League, it's fair to say, under Unai Emery in the latter stint of his career at Arsenal. But since then, this game, I thought he improved a lot and showed a lot more confidence and some of the stuff that we'd seen from him earlier on in the season. So that was good. But really, they wasted a hell of a lot of chances. Repo G says, Tom, would you say that that's worrisome, how Leeds dominated the first half? I don't think it's necessarily really worrying. I think it's more that we still have that mental fragility, as we've already talked about. Mentally, this just isn't the side that we know that it can be. And until we get a really good run of wins under our belt, that confidence is going to take some time to rebuild and return to the team. Fortune says Xhaka was solid today. I don't think he was solid overall. I think he had a very decent second half. First half, he was just iffy. He just really didn't quite get what we saw from the Manchester United game, where he was excellent. I mean, as Owen Martin says, the refs are so inconsistent in this country. How Xhaka didn't get a yellow in the first half, I have no idea. How he didn't get a yellow card. I mean, Danny Murphy was nearly pulling whatever hair is left on his head out of his head about Xhaka not getting a yellow card. And what I found quite satisfying, as I tweeted out at the end, was that at the end, did you notice, if you were watching the BBC commentary, when Leeds had that chance go out for a goal kick where it came off the Leeds player's leg, went out for a goal kick, the groan from Danny Murphy, the disappointment in that man's voice when it went out for a goal kick and he realised, oh, Leeds aren't going to get anything from this game, was so satisfying, because the anti-Arsenal was out in full force. I mean, Ian Wright was doing his best, blessed him, to try and boost the Arsenal side, but they really were giving the guys hell during and midway through the game as well. Obviously, it'll be interesting to see what they say after the game. Probably not the best things either. Arsenal did turn things around in the second half, and that was brought up, in fairness. Aaron Letchford says, I thought we played against a team that is known for the hard press. We have a new coach and are playing in a new way. We have to give the team credit for fighting hard, which we have failed to do so before. And they did that. They definitely turned things around. The fight was there in the second half. They pressed. They put the tackles in. They won the ball back. They were more tenacious and more dogged. And that definitely paid true in the rewards. Now, there's a couple of things that weren't so great. Let's talk about individual performances. Rob Holding has really, really struggled. Fortune says Holding is really rusty, but with more games, he will get better. For me, since Holding's return from injury, it's felt a little bit maybe like he was rushed back from this injury. It was a very, very long one. He did him a lot of damage. When he returned, he scored on that return. I believe it was in the cup competition. Was it the League Cup? I think it was the League Cup against maybe Nottingham Forest, if my memory is on point there. But I just really struggle to see the constant clambering for trying to get Holding back into this first team, because he's not playing better than David Luiz. He's not playing better than Socrates at the moment. You can't say he starts ahead of those guys. I want to get him minutes. I want him playing as much as possible, but I just don't see Holding getting into this starting 11. And when Saliba comes in next season, when you've got other players that are still to come back, Chambers being out is a huge miss, because he's miles ahead of his development in terms of how close they were. If you would have said this a couple of seasons ago, when Chambers was going out on loan and Holding was playing in the FA Cup final, you would have said it was completely the other way around. But based on performances this season, you have to say that Chambers looks the much better player, and it's probably a big boost for Rob Holding that Chambers is going to be out for this length of time. His passing was off. He made some really, really odd decisions at the back and didn't look comfortable whatsoever. In terms of other negative performances, Matteo Guendouzi had a really, really difficult, troublesome first half. Couldn't really get on the ball, lost it. Wasn't making the same amount of challenges. And to be honest, I think there is a psychological thing to that in terms of how we perceive it, because we're used to seeing how good Torreira is next to Granit Xhaka. And when you have to then see Guendouzi, who's not the same type of player, doesn't play in the same type of role, doesn't have the same attributes as Torreira, play next to Xhaka, it's going to expose him as the player that he probably isn't, in fairness, and he probably isn't best playing in that role next to Xhaka. He's probably best playing as a flat midfield three. But he has to play in this pivot role next to Xhaka, which leaves him exposed at times, and that means he's going to be more vulnerable. I don't like the massive backlash that he was getting on Twitter. I thought people were a bit hyperbolic towards Guendouzi. Yes, he's not had a great season, but he's still young, and people forget that. He came into Arsenal as a very, very young guy, started off his career against Manchester City in arguably his toughest game, to come in and start your first game for Arsenal as a massive youngster against the champions. I mean, can you really turn around and say that he's a bad player? Because I don't think you can at this stage. He's still developing, he's still learning. If he was doing this at 24, 25, I'd start to get a little bit more concerned. But the kid's still very, very young, and I'm willing to give him a pass on this occasion, and probably for this season, in fairness. But I still want to see some progression, and hopefully that will happen under Arteta. In terms of other performances, Nelson did okay. I thought he struggled in the first half. It was weird seeing him on the left in this formation, which we'll come on to in a second. But actually, the fact that he got his goal, I think, is really, really good for the guy's confidence. The fact that we can trust Nelson to be this sort of impact player and be someone who can put in a shift and can put in a performance and has some nice technical ability in the box when he needs to, nice, good and close control, can take the ball on well, take on opposition players really, really well, has a good run, really good speed. That really, really helps in terms of a player that you can bring on or use now and again. And with development, the final product will come, the finish will come, and eventually he will improve and get to that point where he can start more games consistently. But what he doesn't need is huge backlash again on social media. The constant battering of our players really gets on my nerves, especially during a period where things are changing. Things are happening, and we need to back these players as much as possible. That also comes down to something negative, where there was a lot of booing at half time. I mean, we're a 0-0 against a Leeds side that are doing extremely well in the Championship. Yes, it weren't the best first half, but we're in a completely new era. And it just feels to me that like we get a little bit too privileged. We've come back from a really fantastic performance against Manchester United, where we put in 120% effort in that game to get all 3 points. We've come against the Leeds side who are on top form, playing really, really well. And we were disjointed. And there were a lot of players who didn't play in that Man United game in that team. And we were playing a completely different system. Socrates playing right back. And yet there was real negativity at half time. I don't want to see that. What I want to see is the fans and the people in the background really, really getting behind our team and really trying to turn things around. I know it's much harder to get up for an FA Cup tie against a Championship team than it is against Manchester United. I understand that and I have empathy for that. But at the same time, we really need to back this, back the manager, whether he wanted him or not, back the team, back the club, back what we're doing, and back the team when you're in the ground. And that's what we need to be. We need to be much more positive as a fan base. We need to be a much, much more positive light on this. And whilst I can understand being critical, you can be critical as much as you like. And we're going to come on to some positives in a minute. And I know I've just covered a lot of negatives about the game, but we as a fan base need to be much, much more positive all the time. We need to be much more positive and we need to back these guys 100%. Let's get on to the positives then, because there were some really good performances. Alexander Lacazette didn't score again, real big shame, but he put in a really unselfish performance. He was winning 50-50s, he was turning players, he was holding players off the ball, making some good passes, was involved in the link-up for the goal, which obviously it didn't go to the intended pass of Pepe, but he forced the mistake. He forced the Leeds players into making that deflection to lead the ball going to Nelson. I thought Lacazette, for me, is someone who works extremely hard and doesn't always get the result and the credit that he probably deserves. Strikers are measured on their goals, and they always will be measured on their goals as a priority. But sometimes we lose sight of what these other guys do bring to the game. Lacazette gives you that. And as Arteta said after the Man United game, he feels a bit sorry for him. He feels a bit sorry because he's not really getting what he deserves in the game. And for me, that will come with time and that will improve and he will get better and he will improve in terms of what he actually does on his goal scoring side of things. But actually, I was really, really happy to see what he did provide for the team. Socrates. Let's talk about Socrates for a second, because the Greek defender played in a position where I don't think, I'm really trying to delve deep into my memory here, but I cannot recall, any time in which Socrates has played at right back. When we saw the team, I thought we were going to see Nelson play as a right wing back, Kolasinac as a left wing back, and Holding, David Luiz, and Socrates as three centre backs. We didn't see that. We saw Socrates play as a right back in a system which I had never, ever seen us play before in terms of the personnel in those positions. The system, there were some tweaks. The pressing was different. The wide players did some different things. Ozil pretty much had the same role, so did Lacazette. But I struggled to understand what Arteta was thinking with this. I would have much rather seen us go to a back three, especially with Holding, who needs the support, and see Nelson play on the right. But Socrates did all right. He did quite well. We lacked a lot going forwards on the right-hand side. Pepe didn't really have the support. He didn't really have anyone overlapping him like he would have got with Maitland-Niles or Bellerin. But Socrates was solid. And the amount of times that Pepe is a little bit vulnerable because he might not get back all the time, Socrates covered. He got in, he made tackles. I love the dirty play that he does. Not dirty in the sense that it's really bad tackles. Dirty in the sense that he's just a little bit rough and ready. He's a little bit gritty, and he does the really hard stuff that people aren't willing to always do, and he does that really well. And that's something that Arsenal haven't really got. And when Socrates was under Unai Emery, defensively he was always vulnerable. And he made a couple of mistakes here and there. He was outpaced. He was out of position a couple of times. He would make the error. But now, under Arteta, Socrates looks like a completely new player. He looks reinvigorated. You could hear that in his words after the Manchester United game. He's having fun again. He's enjoying playing his football. And I think that confidence definitely bleeds into his performances. And it's really, really important that someone as important as Socrates on the pitch has those ideas and mentality to really improve his game. So I'm very, very happy with how Socrates performed. I'm not going to put my head out there and say that I think he should be playing at right back week in, week out. But I guess it's nice to know that we've got an option there and maybe he can do a job. Now, against the better side, against a better quality winger, if you look at the left-sided players like Mane, like Willian, who can play like Pulisic, some of these better players are going to absolutely roast him, let's be honest. And Alioski didn't really have the best game, I thought, especially in the second half. But he was solid and he did okay. Let's get to some of your comments because I feel like I've been a bit negligent of you guys this evening. Arteta shouted at his team. Brilliant, says Joe McGall. Kitchener said Ozil was getting pushy-shovey in the defender's phase. What has Arteta done to this man? Didn't have a great game, but work rate was good once again. Yeah, definitely. We haven't covered Ozil yet. Thought he had an okay game. Tried to influence the game. A little couple of touches that he didn't necessarily need to make because they were a little bit risky. But ultimately, he did really, really well. Again, put a lot more work effort in than we've seen. Ran around the pitch, made challenges, got back. What more can you say about the guy? Danny says, please give me more of Arteta. I see intent in Arsenal pressing and aggression. This Arsenal team will go places, but all this will mean nothing if the board don't back him. It always comes back to that. Always comes back to the fact that we need to see Arteta getting the back end. But you're clearly seeing a constant change, a constant progression, a system being implemented week in, week out, and it is a pleasure to watch this. Adako says, I have nothing to say about the first half. It was the worst. They had almost 10 shots and we just got one shot. Second half was better. Holding was the worst player. I can't disagree with a lot of that, but let's try and think a little bit more positive. Now, PM says, morning, Tom. Another sleepless night in Hong Kong, another win. Let's move on to the next game. Well, I think that's going to be really important. I can feel a sneeze. He's going to come on at any minute now, so apologies if you have to hear that. Oh, God, I'm going to need a minute. No, I'm good. I'm fine. Mika says, it was all about the grind. Liverpool get praised for it. Why don't we? It was a hectic schedule. Legs are gone. If you watch the Liverpool game, Liverpool play with such intensity. And the fact that their players, be it Jones, be it Williams, be it Phillips, be it any of those youngsters, Phillips ain't that young anymore, any of the younger, Elliott, for instance, when you watch Liverpool's B-side play, they play with the same intensity, the same style. The fullbacks push up. They get as many crosses into the box. It's about how you let that philosophy trickle down throughout the youth ranks, throughout the senior side, getting them working with the senior side. And I tweeted out today on match day, and I said that I wanted to see how the philosophy had also bled into some of the players that don't necessarily get as many minutes, like Guendouzi, like Holding, like Willock and Nelson. These players that aren't getting on the pitch as much these days. But is this philosophy being learned by all of the team, not just the first team, not just your regulars, but those players that also come onto the pitch? Martinelli, when he came on, harried, pressed, won the ball back, was a right nuisance in that bottom left-hand corner, was really, really good on the ball, as he is, nearly got a goal or two. And he couldn't quite do that. But it's about that philosophy being ingrained in the club, not just those senior first-team regulars, but those players across the board playing well and playing the system that Arteta wants to implement. John McGall says, I love how Arteta is working with this team. I have needed this type of manager for so long. I know it's still early, but he turned the team around. Great work. Carl Halberg, I've just missed your comment, mate. I'm going to run up to it in just a second. Vladimir says, what touches have Ozil? Guy have 8 touches in the whole first half. Thumbs down. I think you need to have a little bit more in-depth look at actually what Ozil was doing off the ball, how he was pressing players. Look at the difference in Ozil's performance in terms of what he does off the ball, and you might be a little bit more surprised. It's not always about what he does on the ball. He can't always influence the game if the game isn't flowing in the same way that it always needs to, if it's going to suit Ozil. But actually what he did off the ball and what he has done off the ball in the last few games has been really important. Carl said, go back to your comment, and I am. Cole says, I'm fully on this Arteta train. Roll on 2021. We might have some success. Fingers crossed, Cole, that we do. Mayor says, even when they played hard, you could see the players enjoying it and doing it gladly. I smiled a lot during that second half. I'm sure you won't alone, mate. Sebi says, first half was shocking. Very lucky that we have, very lucky. That said, we played much better in the second half, showed some heart. Definitely we did, mate. Charlie says, how good has our front line been since Arteta has come in? Sometimes glimpses of brilliance, but slowly it's starting to feel like Arsenal. Even our defence has shown some fight. 100%, mate. I really, really think we need to put the point across that this team is playing much, much better. I'm going to leave things there. Thank you ever so much for tuning in this evening. I hope you've enjoyed the breakdown. I hope you've enjoyed having your comments read out on the screen. Speaking of which, those that are sticking around just for the end of the show, there will be some news dropping in the next week or two. The channel's unlocked something called memberships, which I hadn't really put into too much perspective, I haven't really looked into as much as I did today, but there's some really intriguing stuff on there, actually, which basically allows me to do a lot more engagement with you, give some of you guys that really enjoy the show some extra stuff if you're up for it. So I'm really going to look into how that can be implemented and rolled out on the channel. If you've got any ideas about what sort of perks could be done, because there's the thing called perks, go have a look into it, but there's going to be an announcement about that fairly soon. I've got some ideas in my head already, some really exciting stuff that I'll hopefully be able to put out to you guys, some personalization, some customization, some identity as well in the chat box. Because what I really love about having these live shows is obviously I've got so many of you guys in here week in, week out. You're really loyal to the show, and I appreciate every single one of you. And having a little bit of identity, a little bit of extra to identify yourselves in the chat, I think that would be really appreciated by some of you. So please, in the comment section below, let me know what you think about memberships and stuff like that. So it could be some really, really good fun for the future. Obviously, it's going to be cheap as chips, I think, to be honest. I can only do what YouTube allows me to do. But it would be cheap as chips, I swear to God. So yeah, that should be interesting. That should be rolled out on the channel hopefully fairly soon once I've got it all sorted out and stuff like that. But I hope you enjoy the rest of your week. Annoying having football on a Monday, isn't it? Because it means you have a whole week last week without football. We've got Palace at the weekend. There will be a podcast out this week at some point. And of course, the normal shows will be resuming as per. Transfer speculation, I'm sure, will be rife and will be across all of that as well. I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening. I will see you again very, very soon. And as always, up the Arsenal.